Alright, what's up, Internet? So, in this video, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on Soul Calibur 5. The game has been out for, I believe, 5 weeks or so, and it has already received a patch, and I've been competing in it, so I have a good idea of how the game functions, and, I think I've let it sink in enough to have, like, a decent opinion on the game. That being said, where to begin? Before the game came out, everyone was saying that this game is kind of like going back to its roots, and it plays a lot like Soul Calibur 2. Um, they made a lot of choices with the game in terms of simplifying it. They removed a lot of moves, they removed a lot of stances, and that is okay with me. Um, and the game functions in a really solid way. I can honestly say that this is the best Soul Calibur game since Soul Calibur 2. Unfortunately, that's not really a great accomplishment because Soul Calibur 3 and 4 were both not um, very good. For one reason or another, both games were kind of not very good. As soon as the game came out, we very early on discovered that the Soul Calibur 2 version of Fuzzy Guard still existed. However, it really didn't really matter in this game that much because while landing attacks are gone, so you can't really abuse Fuzzy Guard in the way you could in Soul Calibur 2. And for that reason, it wasn't that huge of a game-breaking element. Though it did neutralize some mix-ups, it wasn't really that big of a deal. So, let's talk about some of the gameplay changes and new mechanics. Um, I'll start with the things that I like. I think that the meter in the game is relatively well done. Um, the meter, it functions the way I feel like they intended it to, and that's a good thing. Nobody's found any way to exploit the meter, to build meter in an unfair way or anything like that. The way you use the meter is you can either do Brave Edge moves, which are EX versions of the normal moves, and there are like a select few per character, or you can use them to guard impact, which I'll get into a little bit later, and you can also use them for supers, and every super in the game is relatively unique in its uses, and I really like that about the game. So the meter works well, and I enjoy that. The new feature, the new Just Guard system, works really well, even though I still think that none of the top players in the country or in the world are utilizing it to its fullest potential. And what's funny is many of these players, when you watch them playing casuals, they are just guarding just the way I think they should. However, when it comes to the nervous situation of a tournament, I think people are just scared and they're not um, they're not able to rely on it because they're just scared to. And I think that will change over time. In the future, I think people will be just guarding in a very natural way. It'll be a natural part of the game. So that system works really well. I was a little concerned with how, if you're just mashing on guard, you could get just guards and stuff, but it's actually very precise and it's not too hard or too easy. It works very well, and I like that. Um, those are the system features that I like, that are new and they function well. The things that are new that I don't really like that much, the worst one in my eyes is the reverse rage at the end of the round. In case you don't know, at the end when the opponent is left with certain amount of health, I'm gonna guess at maybe 10% or 15%. I forgot the exact numbers, but when their life bar turns yellow, um, at that point you have to do moves that deal 21 points of damage or more to get full damage if they connect. If you do a move like, let's say, a BB, since each individual hit of the BB is doing less than 20 points, those moves will do 50%. Excuse me. So, what that means is that it's much harder to finish an opponent off, and it's also much riskier. And that's okay. It kind of reminds you of Rage in Tekken 6, except the problem with it, in my eyes, is that when someone makes a comeback in Tekken 6 with Rage, what they're doing is essentially they're making a comeback. They're causing the win by hitting you with something. But what this does is it almost makes the person who has the lead kill themselves. And what I mean by that is, let's say it comes down to a final hit situation, and I'm about to kill someone, and I know that all I have to do is do either a low hit or a mid hit. Now, let's say I decide to go with the low hit, and you do not block it, so you get hit by it. Since many of the fast, unseeable lows in the game are disadvantageous on hit, even, like for example a down K, let's say I go with the down K and I hit with it, but since it took 50% damage, since you have reverse rage, it did not kill you. Now, I am being punished for guessing correctly, and I am put into a situation where I have to guess your mix-up. In essence, what that really did is it allowed me to kill myself. Now, this is not a huge problem. I just don't prefer it. It does take getting used to, and you do have to focus on moves that your character has that do more than 21 points damage to finish the opponent. So it's kind of just like, it's irritating to me, but it's not like a terrible feature. The other thing about this game that I don't love is the way movement is restricted by counter hits. So if you get hit while you're sidestepping by anything, it will count as an 8-way run counter, which has attack counter properties. It doesn't do the same damage as an attack counter, but let's say you hit me with a move that on counter hit it stuns and causes a combo. If you hit me while I'm sidestepping or backdashing, it will give you that combo, even though I didn't take the risk of swinging or sticking out a move. Now, on paper that doesn't seem like it's that bad of an idea. And, in the end, it's not a terrible idea. Like, it doesn't really ruin the game, but what it does do is it causes for a lot of counter hits that were unintended by the attacker. And that causes the game to be a little bit less calculated, at least from my perspective. So let me give you an example. Let's say I block something and I decide that I want to sidestep afterwards. And the opponent decided that they were going to swing with a vertical attack. Now, some vertical attacks in this game have tracking. So his intention was to swing with a vertical attack, and assuming that he was either going to get a counter hit or I was going to crouch. But I did not do that. I guessed right and I sidestepped. However, this vertical attack ended up hitting me and getting a counter hit. And that's kind of like he's being rewarded for guessing wrong, and I'm being punished for guessing right. And that happens a lot more than you would think. I mean, there are moves like Cervantes' BBB, or, there's several moves in the game that will hit you sidestepping, but they were not executed with the intention of hitting you while you're sidestepping. And they end up getting lots of damage for it. So, that's another thing that is just the way the game works. I would have preferred for 8-way run and backdash counter hits to be to give you extra damage, but not extra properties. That would have been nice. Going back to the meter, another thing that I would like for this game to have, but which it doesn't, is I would like for the meter to be usable in a way to replenish your guard crush gauge. I think that if they gave a universal command for every character to use, like, let's say 1 bar, to replenish their guard crush gauge from blinking red to neutral, that would be really cool, and it would add a lot of depth to the game, and it would also give you more uses for the meter, which is a good thing, I think. But they did not do that, and these things are actually minor, very minor, because in the grand scheme of the game, it's actually very solid. And I had a feeling when it first came out that it was kind of rushed, and in many ways it kind of was. But at least there are no game-breaking glitches or bugs, and all of the system mechanics that were implemented in the game as of yet have not been broken in any way. So the game seems really solid, and in fact, I really wish that this game was released in arcades, because this type of game I think would succeed in arcades. It's simple, it has supers, and the just guard mechanic is appealing, and I think this game would have succeeded in arcades. It's unfortunate that it was straight to console. Now, all that stuff being said, I think that since I was a Soul Calibur 2 player, and that is still my favorite Soul Calibur game, I do kind of compare it to that. And though this game is really good, and I think it was well made, and I actually enjoy playing it a lot, the one thing that, like, after you take everything that I just mentioned and you put it together, the one thing that I don't like about this game is Soul Calibur to me always was unique because it gave you so many options. As a player, you had just options to do all kinds of stuff. Jumping was super strong, GIs were very good and universal, and there was just such a large move list for each character that you could just there was no way to have two different players play the same character and have them look identical. And that was really what made that game so interesting to me. This new game, Soul Calibur 5, it has a lot less of that. Because the move lists are so restricted, because the movement is also very restricted, and jumping is essentially useless, and GIs are only usable with meter, so you can't really use them as a defensive option. So essentially what they did is they took away a lot of your options. And in many cases, all you're left with is just standing there and blocking. Now, I had heard many players say that turtling is very weak in this game, and you can't just stand there and block. And I actually disagree with that. I think, as always, turtling is the strongest tactic in every fighting game, and in this game, they attempted to make turtling weak. But in the end, what it really does is it just makes a different type of turtling much better, and that is spacing. In my opinion, I think that ranged characters in this game are very, very strong. And I think characters like Nightmare, Ivy, even Cervantes to some point, Astroth as of right now seems very strong. Even though, like, at first people were thinking that Natsu and Leisha are very, very strong characters, and they are strong characters. I think because of the range that they have to stand in to be effective, I think that maybe they're not as strong as people thought. And I'm a very result-oriented guy, and the proof is kind of in the pudding. There have been, I believe, 5 major tournaments for this game, and 4 out of 5 of them were won by Nightmare, and 1 of them was won by Ivy. So I don't think that's a coincidence. On paper, Nightmare is a weak character. He has a lot of unsafe moves, and he has a lot of holes in his offense and defense. But in application, because of the way there's no GI, and because of the way 8-way run counters work, his range versus his movability and movement is actually really, really good. And you can see it when you watch these tournaments. So it's funny to me that their goal was to create a game that was very offense oriented, but naturally players are going to succeed at what's best. And even though Leisha and Natsu and even Mitsurugi are such strong characters, you're not seeing them win tournaments. And I think there's something to be said there. It's not a coincidence. So because of the way movement works, I think keep out and ranged offense is really effective in this game. And, that's just kind of how it is. It's interesting to me the way the game is being developed. It's being patched. And that's kind of difficult because a lot of people are not happy with the first patch. I've heard many, many players say that they're no longer going to play the game because of the patch. I think that's kind of ridiculous. Though, if you really didn't like the game that much in the first place and then they patch it to make it worse, yeah, sure, you don't play the game. But I don't think that everyone should be too concerned yet. The way I see it, the game is incomplete. We're playing an incomplete game, and I'm sure it's going to be patched again. And I think everyone, before they start, screaming about how terrible this game is or how terrible a certain patch is, maybe everyone should just wait to see how it develops, both by the players and by the developers, because they're going to patch it again. So I guess the conclusion that I come to is that the game is very fun. I'm enjoying it. It's not quite as good as Soul Calibur 2 to me, only because the options are too limited, and I like the freedom of Soul Calibur 2. So limited options, is kind of hard to swallow for a fan of Soul Calibur 2 like myself. And because of that reason, it's not quite as good. But regardless, I think it's a great game. I think the system works the way they intended it to. There's no bugs. As far as I can tell so far, the tier list is not too skewed. I mean, there isn't one super good character like that is just going to ruin the game, which is good. I was afraid that because GI is gone, the balance would be an issue, but it really seems to be relatively well balanced. Um, the only thing that that really kind of sucks about this game is that it came out at such a bad time, and at least in the Southern California area, nobody's really playing. The scene is very small. Every week we get less and less entrants in tournaments, which is really bad. And I'm concerned with this game's lifespan. I want this game to be played. It is at Evo, but at least in Southern California, people don't seem to be too interested in it. It was kind of like the flavor of the month, and then it went away. So that's unfortunate because it seems like a solid game. So, in conclusion, the people who are concerned with how good this game is, how solid it is, there are several Tekken players and players of other games who are taking this game seriously. At a tournament level, it functions very well. I think it's a good competitive game. I don't think it's as good as Soul Calibur 2 was, but I think it's leaps and bounds better than Soul Calibur 3 and 4. And though it does have some issues that I'm not in love with as a personal preference, I still think that it's a solid game. So I would recommend it, and I hope that it gets played heavily in this country and internationally, because it is at Evo. I've heard rumor of it being at Super Battle Opera, which would be amazing. And in a perfect world, I would love for Namco to release an arcade version as well, and take this game seriously, because I think it's a solid game overall. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you remember to rate, subscribe, and comment, and I will catch you guys later.